All right. Good morning. I'm Deputy Mayor Jennifer McKelvey, Chair of the Infrastructure and Environment Committee. We have quorum, so I will now call meeting 17 to order. Welcome, everyone. Today's meeting is being held by video conference and in person at City Hall in Committee Room 1. This meeting is also being live streamed online at youtube.com/Toronto City Council Live. Although we are meeting in different locations today, the Infrastructure and Environment Committee would like to acknowledge that the land we are meeting on is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nation, Inuit, and Métis people. We also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit. If you are registered to speak at today's meeting, please listen for me to call your name. I will call the speakers in the order they appear on the list. The list of speakers can be viewed online by visiting the Infrastructure and Environment Committee link at toronto.ca/council and clicking the speakers box for today's meeting. The clerk has provided all materials on toronto.ca/council and on CMP, the clerk's meeting portal. Clerk's IT staff are available to members if you need help with your devices. And as a reminder, please submit all motions by email to iec@toronto.ca. Are there any declarations of interest under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act? Seeing none, may I have somebody move motion to confirm the minutes of the September 27th, 2024 meeting? Thank you, Councillor Sachs. All those in favor, all those opposed, that item carries. We have 5 items on the agenda today and 1 new business item. We will proceed with the agenda rundown. IE 17.1 OMERS update on the climate action plan to the City of Toronto. I will hold. We have a presentation and 2 deputants. IE 17.2 meter transmission units emergency non-competitive contract with Aclara Technologies. Councillor Sachs has a motion, so I will hold until that's in, and hopefully we can do a quick release unless there's any questions. Okay, so we'll try to quick release that later. IE 17.3, does anybody want to hold this item?
I'll hold that item, thank you.
And I have a motion that I will pre-circulate as well on that one. IE 17.4, Parkside Drive, I'll hold as we have 4 deputants. IE 17.5, enhanced nighttime security at Green P parking facilities. Would anybody like to hold this item? I have a quick motion. We can change the wording on the second one to provide a summary of the current security approach and assessment framework used to allocate security resources at Toronto Parking Authority. Maybe we can fix my spelling on authority. Facilities. This is just because the other one was a list of what security guards are where, and I feel like when we have a car theft issue, we don't want to put that out to the public. So individual councillors can follow up with the TPA, and this also comes to council, so we can refine it a bit then. So all in favor of the motion?
I'm not sure. What are you going to do with that?
Well, the item still goes to council too.
What's that?
The item goes to council for final approval. Yeah.
But I don't want to. I want to speak to her.
Oh, okay. Do you want to speak to it now?
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead. Let's do that, and we can discharge the item.
Yeah. No. I thank you, Chair McKelvey. You made a good point. We certainly don't want to tell the criminals and the drug pushers which Green Pea parking lots have got heightened levels of securities and which one don't, because these people monitor our work here and what we do. So this is not very smart to get this out there. And we have problems in our Green Pea parking lots, but we have problems in other parts of our city, laneways, etc. In our TCAC buildings, we have serious problems, to say the least. So I just want to mention one thing that does work. We have had a serious situation with fentanyl pushers that have been taking advantage of people in Eglinton West that are causing incredible harm to people. They've been making millions of dollars pushing fentanyl, and there seems to be no control of fentanyl and the incredible harm it does to people in our city. So one of the things that worked, this was like fentanyl center in this location, and we work with the police at 13 Division and with the Parking Authority, and the private property owner next door. We were able to get a CCTV camera in the parking lot. As a result of that, the pushers have gone, okay? So they don't show up because they don't like to get their photos taken, they don't like to have their license plate, they don't like to see their transactions in public. So it has been very effective, and touch wood that they don't knock off the camera, whatever it is, but so it has brought a great deal of peace and harmony to an area that was infested with these fentanyl pushers. And the police are very happy with it. All the small shopkeepers in Eglinton are very happy, because what happens with people addicted with fentanyl is that they are so desperate to get fentanyl, they have to get a hit every half hour. They basically shoplift continually all day long. So they shoplift, they go to the fentanyl trading center, they get their fentanyl, their hit, and they go back and shoplift some more. So it is a multi-pronged problem that fentanyl causes, but it's just an example of a measure taken by the police and the parking authority that work to make a place safer and free of these drug pushers. So that's the way we should approach it. Don't in any way send out a list of levels of security at our properties across the city. That is the stupidest thing you could ever do. The drug pushers would be targeting all the ones that don't have high level security in 5 minutes. Anyways, that's my speech, and that's it.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Sachs.
Yeah, I wanted to echo that. We're having tremendous problems bringing business back to the downtown, and one of the things I'm hearing from my constituents and others is that for people who are willing to drive downtown, they're now unwilling to drive downtown because the parking is so dangerous, the parking garages are so dangerous, and they've been harassed. Open drug use, open drug sales, feces and everything else. So this is a very important motion. We need to improve it. Thank you.
Okay, great. So on the amendment, all those in favor, all those opposed. On the item as amended, all those in favor, all those opposed. Okay, that brings us to introducing the last item, i.e. 17.6, Community Sport and Recreation Investment Fund application stream. So I will move that it's added to the agenda. All those in favor, all those opposed, that item's carried.
Hold it.
And Councillor Pasternak would like to hold the item. Okay, great. So now that we've run through the agenda, we will go back up to IE 17.1, OMERS update on the climate action plan to the City of Toronto. We have a presentation from the Chair of the Board of Directors of OMERS and the Vice President of Sustainable Investing and the Vice President of Sustainable Investing Operations, Oxford Properties, to give us a presentation. Thank you for joining us, and maybe you can introduce yourselves as you start as well.
Yes, thank you very much, Chair. My name is George Cook. I am the Board Chair of OMERS Administration Corporation, and as you indicated, I'm joined today by two colleagues, Catherine Preston to my immediate left and Hala Al-Akel, who is to Catherine's left. My opening remarks will be very brief, and the substance of our presentation will come from my two colleagues, and then, of course, we welcome questions. It was just a year ago or so when we were last here, and at that time, our board had just approved our climate action plan. One of the points that I would like to stress is the action plan itself we see as a strategic document. It guides the way in which we and our people are actually responding to these various matters. The actual reporting of data against plan happens for us in the February period when we publish our annual report. And so we're in a situation today where we're back, but some of the data that I'm sure some of you would like to see is probably not going to be available until February. What I might suggest, Chair, is that if there is interest, we would be more than happy to come back post that February reporting of our results and discuss any of the data. What I can assure you, however, is two things. One, my colleagues today will be able to share information with you that should encourage you that we are making good progress. And I can also tell you that our board reviews our progress quarterly, and we as a board are very comfortable that the relevance of the plan is still being maintained and that the execution against it is going as one might expect. With those opening remarks, I'm going to turn it over to Catherine, and she in turn will pass it to Hala, and then we'll go for questions, if that's okay.
Good morning, everyone, and thanks for the invitation to be here with you today. I was going to start with just a brief overview of our sustainable investing approach, which aligns with how we think about climate change. It's been a long-term view at OMERS that thinking about sustainability issues, whether it's climate, whether it's health and safety, the issues you just spoke about, Councillor Cole, as we're making investment decisions, is critical to the long-term performance of the investments we're making, and therefore linked to the ability for us to pay our pensions in the long term. So when we think about these factors, we take a three-pronged approach, which you can see the three pillars on the slide here, and we start with integration. Every investment decision that's being made, whether it's a new investment or ongoing asset management or on exit, we're thinking about sustainability issues. The investment teams integrate these factors as part of their traditional financial analysis. We know that it provides a more holistic view of the company that we're investing in, and it balances the view of risk, return, and long-term value. We're also focused on collaboration, working with like-minded investors. You know, there's times where we may not hold a significant position in a company and would have less influence. So we tend to partner with other investors that share similar views to try to advance progress at companies when it comes to sustainability practices. And the last pillar on engagement is, as a direct investor, we do tend to hold some significant positions, particularly in the private assets, where we have a seat at the table and our ability to influence is much stronger, which is critical when we're talking about advancing our progress on the climate action plan. And as George just spoke to, we do have a very strong governance foundation, very strong support from the board and executive leadership team as we're executing on these commitments. So as we mentioned, the Climate Action Plan came out last September. We briefed you on what the plan was last year. Now it's time to update you on the progress we've made, but I'll just remind you why we did it. It's the same recognition the city has that climate change is the most pressing issue of our time. We need to all be taking action because we're all going to be impacted as a result. So the commitment we made is tied around our net zero 2050 commitment. And that does align with the strictest rules of the Paris Climate Agreement in terms of wanting to get to 1.5 degrees, as well as the time frame of 2050 being in line with the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change recommendation. And the plan is actually, modeled after frameworks that global investors like OMERS put out to create these plans. So we can move to the next slide, please. So the commitments we made, there was the net zero 2050, not just for our portfolio, but also our own operations as OMERS and Oxford as a corporation. Next is to reduce the carbon intensity of the portfolio, and we've set short and medium-term goals on our pathway to 2050. The 2030 goal would be the midterm goal, and that's a reduction of 50% by 2030. And we've committed to keep setting those goals every 5 years to hold ourselves accountable to these commitments. Then we made some commitments looking forward. So the carbon footprinting exercise is a very backward looking, and you'll see in the data, it's already 2 years old data that we're looking at. But the more forward-looking measures are beyond reducing the carbon. We're also looking at the opportunity set. How are we investing in those assets which are actually going to help with the transition? And so that's green asset investments and a commitment to grow those to 30 billion by 2030. We're also focused on the assets already in the portfolio that we need to reduce their emissions. So partnering with them, we have a transition sleeve where we'll invest in higher carbon assets that are actually focused on decarbonizing the economy. An example of that would be as energy as a service asset, which is helping other companies reduce their emissions. We also made a commitment to exclude investments with material thermal coal revenue. So as we think about the carbon intensity of fossil fuels, coal is the most carbon intensive, and we've reduced that or set a high bar for investing in those companies. So the next slide talks through the performance so far. And as George mentioned, this was the first year. The next report will come out in early 2024, and we'll have a couple more years of progress. We've made significant progress on reducing the carbon intensity of the portfolio, now down 52% And what we have said is we know this is not going to be a straight line down. Some of the data will show there's a bit of fluctuation the first few years, and it has been trending down. But we do expect, because it's a point-in-time measure, we take the measurement on December 31st each year, that things will fluctuate in intermittent years. But the trajectory is going in the right direction. In terms of the investments in green assets, that's $21 billion we reported earlier this year. That's up $3 billion from the 2 years when we started reporting it. So there is progress there. The other thing that OMERS does is issue debt. So we've issued both sustainable and green bonds through Oxford Properties, up to $2 billion. So that is money going towards financing social and green investments with social and green attributes. In terms of holding ourselves accountable, as we all know, what gets measured gets managed, and that's tying compensation to our senior executive team and investment leaders to the climate action plan and making progress therein. The next slide is all the numbers, and I'll just point out some highlights here. The top table, the top line is absolute emissions. So that's the financed emissions within OMERS portfolio across more than 2,500 entities that OMERS invests in. We add up all the carbon emissions based on our ownership, and that's the trend over time. So you can see it went up in the first few years, but it's been progressing downward ever since, and you'll see some more numbers in February when we're back. The third line is our weighted average carbon intensity, or WACI measure, which shows the progress that we use to tie, that's the measure we tie to our interim goals. So the 50%, 52% reduction that we've achieved is on that measure. You can also see the green asset growing from 18, and what's not there is the 2023 number of 21 billion, so that growth is there. The last point I'll make before turning to Hala is just on the bottom table, it shows you which asset classes, where the carbon's coming from. That helps us focus our attention. You can see the equities has the largest amount from absolute emissions, and that is in the public equity book. Another key measure for us at the bottom of that table is the amount of data we actually have to do these calculations that's reported by companies versus what we have to actually estimate. And across the portfolio, 63% of that data is real and reported. We have to estimate 37% of that, and the bulk of that is from public companies that aren't as strong reporters. This is why we continue to advocate for regulators, security regulators, provincial and federal governments to mandate climate emissions reporting so that we can better do that work. Now I'll turn it to Hala for update on Oxford.
Thank you, Catherine. Thank you, Catherine. Just to give you a bit of some context, so we at Oxford, we work very closely with Catherine's team on the climate action plan and the implementation of the plan. Oh, sorry. Yes? Is this better? Yes. Okay, sorry about that. So with Catherine's team, we have a number of task force to help us monitor, assess, and evolve the program. So, which gives us a unique opportunity across the business units at OMERS to learn from the actions that we've taken over the past few years, and then let that impact our how we shape our priorities. So what I'll start with is, for example, Catherine mentioned some of our objectives around credible plans for our portfolio companies. Within Oxford, we've created a playbook and set the criteria for these credible plans and have engaged with 100% of these companies over the last year. So this is just an example of the implementation and progress so far. However, as we do that, we're also learning about the challenges, and once we've tackled sort of what seems immediate and obvious, there are areas where we'll need to focus a little bit more, and these have been highlighted and are now focus areas for our 2025 plan. One of the examples that's outside of our control is the state of the grid. So the rate of decarbonization of the electric grids in which we operate is a limitation. The building can work as hard as it wants, but if the grid is not electrifying at a certain rate, we won't be able to reach a net zero. The second piece is the cost-benefit analysis and affordability with our CapEx constraints. So once we've identified the measures that can have the most impact, then it becomes harder to tackle the remaining changes or retrofit initiatives on a building. The last one I'd like to mention is the challenges that are specific to certain sectors. For example, in the industrial sector, the majority of emissions are Scope 3 emissions, so the emissions of the tenant, and in most cases, we don't have control over these. So we have control over the landlord emissions, but not the tenant emissions. And this is where you'll see in our framework, the focus on the tenant engagement piece has been put as one of our priorities. The second one is with the residential portfolio, where privacy is a challenge because, again, Scope 3 emissions are tenant emissions, and we often don't have access to this data, and it's difficult to manage that. So we can focus on the landlord emissions again. And lastly, and it's a sector we're invested in, it's a life science sector, and that sector requires a high pace of air changes, and this means that the process loads are really high, and that the intensity needs of this asset class is really important. So, these are the kind of things as we're in this execution and implementation mode of the climate action plan that was published last year, that we're learning and that are refining our approach. And with that, maybe I'll talk about three things. The first one, integration and the importance of governance. So we have increased the number of trainings across our investment team, asset management team, property teams, legal teams, and so on, because in order for this decarbonization to happen, that systemic learning and awareness needs to take place. And then there's the data piece. We talk about reporting on our results. So we can't, like Catherine said, we can't manage what we measure. So we're trying to get as much coverage as we can. However, we're not waiting to have 100% of the data to act. And to that effect, in the Oxford portfolio, we've rolled out an ESG data management platform called Measurable, and we're happy to share with others our lessons learned from that. And lastly, the focus is very much on executing at asset levels with finding the proven technologies, manageable incremental costs, and like-for-like alternative. And with that, I'll end my remarks.
Madam Chair, there seems to be a lot of chatter around the committee room, and
Councillor Perruzza.
it's very distracting. And I love these guys, but
Decrease the chatter. Yes. Okay, thank you. Questions, Councillor? Okay, I do not have the clock working, so I am going to put on my timer and it will buzz if you are out of time. So while we're trying to fix that, please recognize that. Okay, thanks.
Anyway,
Oh,
yes, and
do you want to go to, we have two speakers. Do you want to
Oh,
hear
yes.
from
Let's
the
hear-
speakers and then we'll pull? Okay, so we're going to go to the speakers and then we'll come back to you for questions. So that way, if there are any other questions raised through that process, then you have the ability to answer to that.
Absolutely fine.
Okay, great. The first speaker is Laura McGrath. Okay, thank you, Laura. And with apologies, you'll hear a beep if you're out of time. Okay, thanks.
Hi, thanks for having me. I'm Laura McGrath. I'm Senior Manager with Shift Action for Pension Wealth and Planet Health, or SHIFT for short. We help translate what pension funds are doing on climate to pension fund members so that those members can engage with their funds on the climate crisis. I've submitted a written communication. It's pretty technical. I'm going to be more informal in my remarks. And first off, I just want to say, you get that this matters to your pension. So OMERS owns Jasper Park Lodge. A third of the community of Jasper went up in a wildfire this summer. The lodge, as I understand, was mostly unscathed, but it was evacuated and closed for a couple of months. So these are the financial risks that are coming for the way in which your pension is invested. The good news that you've heard is OMERS is doing a lot. We think this is a good news story. I think the folks here from OMERS today should be proud. The City of Toronto has pushed them. Stakeholders like CUPE have pushed them, and OMERS has responded. So I think there's a lot of progress to recognize here. After watching that presentation and thinking about the breadth and the seriousness with which OMERS is talking about its climate action plan and its targets, there's one thing that strikes me as pretty incongruous, which is that OMERS still has a couple of billion invested in the causes of the climate crisis. So emissions are going up, carbon dioxide is going up, temperature is going up because we burn oil, gas, and coal. That's why net zero 1.5 degrees aligned scenarios have since 2021 said that we need no new investment in coal, oil, and gas development. That's why the UN high-level expert group on net zero commitments from non-state entities headed by Canada's Catherine McKenna said that net zero is entirely incompatible with continued investment in fossil fuels. OMERS doesn't have a public exclusion on making new investments in fossil fuels, and I haven't heard them explain how they're going to wind down the operations of the fossil fuel infrastructure that they already own. And I want to point out that it's important that this is public, because without a public exclusion, it's sending mixed messages to the government, to the market, to the financial sector in Canada, and to the members about where we think we're going on this climate trajectory, where we think the net zero transition, when is it going to happen, how is it going to happen, are we going to meet our goals? So I'm going to share some examples of pension funds who have made a move on this. So the largest pension fund in Europe, ABP, had 11 billion in liquid oil, gas, and coal assets that it's divested. It's now working its way through another 5 billion of less liquid assets that it's divested. ABP says the returns from these assets have been easy to replace. They have tried to engage with the companies before deciding to invest and concluded that that was ineffective. These companies would not lower their emissions. They decided divestment was the wiser choice. New York City public pensions have done this too. I'm going to quote their head of ESG, who said a month or two ago, major fossil fuel exploration companies don't have a net zero plan, and so the stranded asset risk is very high. That's why we divested from them. Asking them to stop is like asking Starbucks to stop selling coffee. Closer to home, Quebec's public pension manager, CDPQ, has exited all its investments in coal mining and in the oil sector, saying that these are not energies of the future. The head of sustainability at CDPQ was in Toronto a couple of weeks ago for the PRI in-person conference, and I'm quoting from him there, "We are a fiduciary and returns are number one and always will be, and we are very happy to be out of the oil sector." So if oil and gas companies want to keep selling oil like Starbucks sells coffee, if a pension fund can meet its fiduciary duty and generate returns without being invested in the causes of the climate crisis, if a pension manager can be very happy to be out of the oil sector, I would like to know why OMERS has not yet made this move. With all of that, I do want to say I recognize how far OMERS has come, and it is really a pleasure to see the progress reflected on those slides here. This is the next step in a credible climate plan, phasing out fossil fuel investments before they become stranded assets, before the oil and gas companies are overwhelmed by all the climate litigation that is coming for them, and before coal, oil, and gas hit a peak and start a permanent decline, which the International Energy Agency says is going to happen before the end of this decade. OMERS can do this. They need to hear from stakeholders like the city and from all of the OMERS members in this room that you want them to take the next step and phase out fossil fuel investment. Thank you.
Thank you. My timer had just gone off. Good timing. Questions of the deputant. Councillor Sachs, don't run away, don't run away.
Laura, wait. Yeah. Anyway, thank you for all the hard work you and Shift have done on this. It has been very helpful, and I'm glad to hear you acknowledge that there has been progress. You do have a lengthy submission. What do you think is the single most important thing the city should be asking OMERS to do?
So I focused my remarks on making a fossil fuel exclusion public because I think that is the most important place. I think the climate plan is there. There's progress against it. I know that there are a lot of stakeholders holding OMERS accountable for the details of executing against that plan. But when I think about moving the economy in Canada as a whole, this is where we really need the financial sector to step up and say, this is actually requires getting off of oil, gas, and coal, and we're not going to keep fueling the problem.
Thank you.
Any additional questions, Deputant?
Yeah. Can I ask a question?
Well, I thought you were just going to self-recognize, but yes, I will recognize Councillor Perruzza has the floor.
You know, yeah. You mentioned the largest pension fund in Europe. They dropped, you said it was about $15 billion worth of monies that they had invested in sort of the fossil fuel sector. When they pulled out, did the sector just sort of, you know, lower its, I mean, there was less money, so did the fuel emissions come down, or did other money just simply step into that void? What happened there? If you're aware of that.
Yeah, so I can't trace their 15 billion exactly to tell you what happened, but
I don't know if I remember the exact number you said.
Yeah.
I think it was 15 billion.
Yeah, sorry, yeah, 16, 11, and 5. Okay. Some of it was in public companies. That's the 11 billion that's already, it was more liquid. That's the 11 billion that's already been divested. So what you're pointing at is what's the effect of divestment on oil and gas companies and their emissions, which is a valid question. The part I want to remind you of is what's the effect of your pension of holding on to companies that need to be phased out?
No, I understand the principle behind it. I get that, and I support a lot of what you said. I just wanted to better understand what happened there. In terms of,
So I don't know the particulars of what happened there. What I can say is that yes, there are other buyers for fossil fuel assets, for sure. And hopefully other buyers will get stuck with them instead of your pension manager.
The health of my pension, I'm always worried about, okay? So that's always top of mind. Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Any additional questions, the Deputant? Thank you for joining us. Our next speaker on this item is Hamish Wilson. Thank you for joining us. You have 5 minutes and the clock is working. So were you.
And I missed some of the presentation. I'm very sorry, because you learn here an awful lot, and I haven't had a chance to fully review, obviously, the materials. But I would echo what the previous deputy had said, Ms. McGrath, about this is a good start. There's a lot of good things happening here. Finally, we're a quarter of the way into the greenhouse century. We've got to get moving. The climate crisis has gotten a little bit more urgent. The forest fires recently have been adding like 3 billion tons worth of carbon into the atmosphere. We were already about the worst per capita in the world, and somehow the forest fire emissions are not counted in international greenhouse gas profiles. So we're pretty stinking bad, and the emergency is becoming ever more acute if you're not paying attention. And I can understand that you're overwhelmed with all the things that you're actually trying to attend to. Thank you, and it doesn't help that some levels of government are keen on what I would call pyrotization, making it all worse by causing fires when they smash things. So it's really uphill for everybody to try and do things. And some things I'm glad there was mention of the scope 3. The capital energy is what I think we should be thinking about a little bit more too, is how much energy is embodied and how much carbon is embodied in all the materials that we have, including buildings, including roads. So I hope that we can manage to move towards somehow capturing that aspect of things in all our pension funds. And instead of building new, for instance, what can we do to renovate existing buildings? Can they invest in retrofits a bit more as opposed to new builds? So that's one aspect of things, and it's not only mere carbon dioxide. There are some HCFCs in the insulations that are not good. The PFCs in the aluminum smelting, I don't think have been totally factored in, if at all, and they're pretty much permanent greenhouse gases. And it's really hard. I'm also glad that they mentioned the very hard issue of how to get tenants incented and know how to capture those emissions and do something about them. And I've wondered in the residential sector, is there any way of actually sharing the utility bills? Because it does help to have a direct payment interest in conserving energy. So is there a way that the commercial properties could lead the way by having half of the heating paid for by the landlord and half the heating paid for by the occupants somehow? Because if both parties have an interest in the most efficient operations, that might help actually do more, and it might set a template for the residential sector where you are at the mercy of what the landlord has done and what the landlord hasn't done, usually hasn't. So it's complicated. It really is thorny. I don't know how we move it. And I'm glad somebody mentioned the only getting out of thermal coal. Coal's great, so in some ways, and so is gas and oil. The energy intensity of what we've built around us has been incredibly enabled by these concentrated fossil fuels, the concentrated energy in them, but it's bad. So just saying, thermal coal is not enough, got to do more. And in terms of what's green, that's an interesting thing too. I do not regard, for instance, nuclear power as being a green thing. This gets back to the capital energy, but also the rad waste. And I know some people will lump in nuclear as being a green power source, and I am not one of those people. It is toxic. If you think it's that green, please take home your share and more to live with for the next 100,000 years. So that's a big thing, and yet we need the electricity in some ways. So I'm sure there's some other things. I was a little late. Yes, you're quite correct, Councillor Prutz. I did manage to skim over the. Yep. I managed to skim over Bloomberg News thing, and the survey by NTT was suggesting whatever NTT is, was suggesting that up to 95% of companies will fall short of their emissions goals. So it's going to be really awkward to try and figure out who is good, and there are going to be bumps in the road, to echo what the presenters from OMERS were saying. Thank you. Oh yeah, there's a big rally and bike ride on Wednesday afternoon at 5 up at the Queen's Park, speaking of trying to reduce the climate emissions, and forwards is backwards once again.
Thank you. Questions of the deputant? Seeing none, thank you for joining us. He did. He ended exactly on time. Okay, we'll ask the presenters if you mind coming back now. I know there were questions. Councillor Sachs, when they're settled, you can start.
Okay, well, thank you. Good to have you back again this year, and glad that you'll be back in March with real data. I want to follow up on the question, Mr. Prudz, Councillor Prudz, is that it's great to see your intensity coming down, but it doesn't do any climate good if the emissions were only transferred to somebody else. Are the steps you're taking to reduce your climate intensity actually improving climate damage or reducing climate damage?
Yeah, and it's a great question, Councillor Sachs, and something that we're measuring. One of the goals we talked about was working with our highest emitters, our top 20 contributors, which make up half of our emissions profile, to decarbonize their business. So how are they committing? Have they made a commitment to net zero? How are they measuring that? What capital expenditure planning do they have to actually achieve that? And we're at the stage now of laying out those plans, and we'll start reporting progress or measuring their progress over time as those plans start to unfurl. These things do take time, as you know, at the city very well. I don't need to tell you that, but these plans take a long time to come together, and we continue to have those conversations both directly with companies as well as through Climate Engagement Canada, which is a collaborative engagement platform.
So what I'm hearing you say is the emission intensity reductions that we'll hear about in March, some of them are from selling the emissions to someone else. Some of them are going to start moving to actual emission reductions, but you can't tell us how much yet.
That's correct.
All right. We'll ask again in March. Please try to get good data.
Before you move on, Councillor, when we use 20 sounds like a small number, but if we don't know who the top 20 are going to be in 2030. So to get 20, you got to probably work with 40 or 50. I don't want you to think that we've picked an artificially small number to do that. So just for clarification.
Okay, well, thank you for that. Are you working with your member municipalities to invest in the transition here? We talked about that a year ago. There is, as a Shift has pointed out, an enormous need for capital in the municipal sector. You know, your members for capital to make the transition, to buy electric buses, to improve the buildings. What are you doing to accelerate your investments in your home municipalities?
I think I would step back and say where a municipality approaches us, we're more than prepared to engage, but we are investors. We're not operators. And so there's a notion that some out there that like to comment about what we're doing or not doing have, that somehow or other we should configure an organization to actually go to municipalities and actually do things. And
I'm not asking you about that.
No, you're not. But that's the kind of discussion we're hearing. No one's presenting us with concrete examples of, would you invest with us to do this? We're not sitting there trying to invent third parties that allow us to do this, but we're quite open to share the skill sets we have, the ways in which we're managing our own portfolio with others. But right now, there's no substantive movement on the part of the municipalities.
Okay, so you're saying the municipalities aren't asking you clearly enough. We need to ask you more clearly. Okay, I got that.
And you have to be helpful if you, in asking, if you can ask us, you could propose something that you're wanting to do where we could invest, recognizing that we do have an obligation
Understood.
to our
I've got to
plan
keep
members
going
for
'cause
return.
our time's limited. The transition sleeve that you identified to put money into the worst polluters and hopefully help them improve. Have you invested any money in that sleeve?
Not at this point, no.
Not yet, okay. The compensation link, council has asked for a compensation link. I'm glad you have one. Is it material? Like roughly what percentage of the pay of the senior team are affected by your climate performance?
I would suggest that it's material, and the amounts will change depending upon whether it's the CEO or those that are at different parts of the organization. But at a senior level, it is material enough that it would grab everyone's attention. And we will contemplate whether we disclose those specifics in our report in February or not. But
Okay.
trust me, it's material.
I will ask again.
I expect that.
The majority of your emissions come from
Last question.
Working on it. The majority of your emissions come from your public equity investments. What are you doing to bring that down?
So that's where I would point to the direct and collaborative engagement we conduct with the companies that are highest emitting in those portfolios. So we're part of Climate Engagement Canada, which is talking to the top 40 emitters in Canada as a group of investors to ensure they have climate action plans and reducing their emissions in line with the 1.5 degree commitment of net zero 2050. We're part of global actions on that front through climate engagement or Climate Action 100+, as well as the direct engagement we do through our global equity portfolio and the direct relationships we have with those companies we invest in.
Thank you.
Okay, we have Councillor Pasternak, and then Deputy Mayor Cole, and then Deputy Mayor Morley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just for clarity, this is for information only. Are we moving receipt on this item?
We'll be moving receipt.
Yeah, okay, so that's the only thing before us. Just very quickly, and I don't know if there are any regulatory rules governing foreign ownership, but are you investing more in foreign green initiatives to meet your targets and foregoing domestic investments that might not be in that lens?
As investors, we look for the opportunities to allow us to make the return requirements we need for our plan members, regardless of whether they're international or domestic. There's no conscious decision that says, let's look domestic or let's look international. We have approximately, at this moment, 21% of our assets invested in Canada, and some of our substantial green assets are here. But there's no conscious decision that says, look here, look there. We're looking for assets to honor the pension promise.
So there's no denying Canada is a resource-based economy, and we always like to see investments in our country to keep the economy running and to keep Canadians employed. How do you balance this, where you're a Canadian-based pension fund in a heavily resource-based economy, yet you have these targets that may be leading you to more foreign green investments?
So as an example, and this is where I would disagree with the individual that spoke a few moments ago, we have a material investment in Bruce Energy. We own approximately 49% of it. We do consider it a green asset. We have a very different view with respect to the advantages and strengths of nuclear energy. That's a Canadian asset, for example. There are other green assets that we have here across our portfolio. But if there were more opportunities, we would invest more money here. We're not going to forego or pass on our obligations to earn appropriate levels of return for the plan members over this domestic international challenge.
I guess at the end of the day, you have an obligation to your contributors and plan members to make sure there's a viable pension plan.
Correct.
Thank you.
That's first and foremost.
Yes, no, I understand that fully. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor Cole.
Yes. What percentage of your investments are in real estate property holdings, approximation?
Approximately 20%.
And so 20% there. With the collapse of the condo market here in Canada, basically, and the collapse really of development, residential development seems, because we've got a surplus of 25,000 condos that haven't been sold here in Toronto, and they've only sold 2,000 last year. Is this going to have an impact on your ability to meet your targets of providing for fund members and then also reaching your climate goals? Are you evaluating that impact of this collapse?
We are not aggressive participants in the condo market. Our real estate assets are incredibly diversified, and I don't want to say that condo market collapse is having no impact on us, but I'll suggest to you that it's not having a material impact, and it's having a much greater impact on others. And so the answer to your question is no, I don't think it will have a material impact for us.
I know that you're a major partner in the development of the Yorkdale lands in my ward.
Correct.
Where you're going to build 20 buildings. I'm not sure, I suspect some of them will be condos. And then you're also a major holder of the Eglinton Canada Square there at, so with, that's what I'm sort of worried about, is that if you're heavily invested in those two major developments, sites in the middle of the city, is that going to have an impact on your bottom line and your mission to deliver to your pension holders?
Do you want that? No, we're full speed ahead with not only those developments here in the city, also there's one that you'll hear about shortly, if you haven't already, in Scarborough, and another one in the downtown core. So we're not suggesting for a moment that this condo market isn't a serious issue, but it's not going to put a barrier in front of any of our plans.
And so the other 80% of your investments, how would you describe them? And sort of like the big portions of it, where would they be, your investments for pensioners?
We have approximately, I'm using approximate numbers.
Yes.
Approximately 20% or thereabouts in infrastructure. So that would be something like a Bruce Energy, for example, or an Australian port. London City Airport. I throw that one in because I know it'll aggravate my friends here in the context of climate. That's our infrastructure portfolio. We have the real estate portfolio. Again, we have approximately 20% in private equity, and that's largely focused in the United States at this point. We then have a private debt piece, and we have a bond and a public equity piece. The public equities, again, is about 20%. So it's basically 20-20-20 across the board. And each of those portfolios are diversified geographically with the net effect in Canada across the whole thing at the moment of 21%.
Would you be willing maybe to come back to another committee, maybe not this one because our focus is on the environment, in terms of giving us an overview of how OMERS is doing in its investments across many sectors, and because you're very much involved in a global way and a national way, and it might be of help to our city in terms of determining where our economy is going, because we just had, as you know, the mayor and our budget chief issued a 10-year economic plan. Were you consulted on the city's 10-year economic plan?
Not that I'm aware of, but you must understand I'm a non-executive chair. There may well have been a consultation at the management level somewhere, but I'm not aware of any.
But you would be willing to come back and make a deputation before the appropriate committee in dealing with that aspect of your mandate?
Absolutely. It was just a week ago that the nominee from the city on our board, along with the representative on Sponsors Corp, which is the other half of our bicameral governance model, were here and did talk about our results. But we'd be more than happy, I personally would be more than happy to come back with colleagues at any point that the city asks.
Thank you.
I think one of the deputants had an additional point on, did you want to add something on that?
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair. Celine Chivetti, I'm the Chief Pension Officer. I would just sort of articulate two things that Mr. Cook said. We actually do report regularly to the General Governance Committee, so we're here once a year to provide an annual update. And then as staff, we work very closely with David McIsaac within Pension, Payroll, and Employee Benefits, and we do facilitate a conversation annually with Paul Johnson.
They just presented at GLC and do regularly. Thank you. Deputy Mayor Morley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you, thank you for the presentation and the great work. It is very heartening and a great direction to see. I just wanted to pick up on the question from Laura around the phase out of fossil fuel investments and what the sort of vision and intention is around that piece.
I'm happy to start, and I think what we've shown as part of our climate action plan and the progress that we know that it's going to take time is we have shown to be responsive to the changing world around us as we focus on the exclusion of coal from thermal coal from our investment portfolio. I would say that's a good indication that we will respond as things transition as part of the energy transformation.
Thank you. We'll watch that one.
Councillor Perruzza.
I wasn't going to ask anything, but, you know, having sat around a few of these conversations here, I often wonder, so I understand the objectives and I appreciate them, and I agree that they're noble objectives, and I believe in climate change just as much as anybody else. But for example, Councillor Cole asked, how much money do you have in, you know, land development and the production of stuff? And the production of stuff is a climate disaster, right? The production of concrete, the smelting of steel, the smelting of aluminum, the carpeting, all of the synthetics, the vinyl, and all of the rest of it that goes into the creation of housing and stuff, heating systems and all the rest of it. How does one pick and choose often in terms of, you say, well, how do we get to a better place, a greener place, and then at the same time, with so much pressure, for example, to produce housing, which environmentally is just an absolute disaster.
As simple as it sounds, I think you do the best you can. I don't think our citizens are prepared to live without homes at this particular point. So we try to respond in as efficient and effective a way as we can, recognizing both our need to earn an appropriate return to look after the sustainability of the pension plan for the plan members, but at the same time, we're doing it consistently, and I would argue at a world-class level in terms of being green. And so, to your point, we have no miracle sauce that's going to allow us to eliminate all. What we do have, however, is the opportunity to do the things that do need to be done in the most productive and efficient way possible, incorporating a very strong recognition of climate, and that's exactly what we're doing.
So it's sort of offsets, as it were. We do better in a particular area, and then we pile on somewhere else. No?
We're not at this point where we're relying on offsets, which others are. We're finding opportunities to actually be green, and we'll keep searching for those long before we start relying on offsets.
Thank you.
Okay, I think that exhausts the questions. Thank you for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you again next year. Speakers to this item? Councillor Sachs?
Yes, thank you. I do want to thank the OMERS team and also the SHIFT folks. It was an enormous amount of work to have the climate plan adopted last year, and a big step forward for OMERS. A lot of work can be going on behind the scenes, but in terms of getting a clear public direction and the emphasis behind it. So glad to see the climate action plan. What we want to know now is, great, you've had it for a year. What difference has it made? What difference are you making? And we can't tell that without data. So thank you for agreeing to come back in the spring. When you have data, we'll switch you to a spring reporting schedule so that we don't all have to guess. It is, of course, we're interested in our future pensions, but we're equally interested in having a world that one can live in with a pension, and that all the young people, which is most of the folks here are younger than me, will have a future. So we need you folks who got the bags of money, we need you to be doing all of your jobs, the fiduciary job, but also preserving a livable world, because a bag of money in a dead world isn't worth a darn thing. So we'll see you in March, and I'll see you before then, and please keep at it, and glad to see progress. Thank you.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor Cole?
Thank you for coming, and thank you for the work you're doing and how you're taking this responsibility of sustainability very seriously. Obviously, there's always more work to do, and I'm sure Councillor Sachs will make sure you're doing what you got to do. I just want to say, ironically, last night we had a public meeting at the North York Toronto Community Centre with the Eglinton Park Ratepayer Association, and the place was steaming hot. So I asked the organizer, says, can't we do something about the heat? He says, well, no. We don't have the ability to control the heat in this building. I just was flabbergasted. It's going to be very hot September, October. They don't have a thermostat or a control mechanism in our community centers. I don't know if they're all like that, but I think we better look at our own house in terms of how much, as I said, people wanted to basically go down to their t-shirts. It was so hot in that place. We had to be there for a couple hours. So I don't know if there's anybody here from Parks looking at that, but I can't believe there's no thermostat in the damn building. Anyways, sort of digress. But I just wanted to say that I think the critical thing here is that you're taking this mandate seriously of sustainability. The challenge I think we all have is that most people don't give a damn about climate change anymore. I mean, if you look at the US election results or election issues, they're basically, it's like a 3% as an issue that people care about. If you look at, Canadian politics in terms of issues that come up, where the one in New Brunswick or whatever, it's not there. So I think we all have to do a better job, and we're asking, OMERS, this is basically in charge of ensuring the viability of these pension funds of hundreds of thousands of workers, that we have to do a better job as elected officials on getting people to realize there's, we know we've got climate chaos. Talked about the fires, everything. So we haven't done a good enough job of explaining this because people, it's just like the bike, anti-bike craziness that's going on now. It's just like a frenzy that's going on. That's an example of fact people are not taking the climate chaos seriously. And so we ask you to take the climate threat seriously, and I hope you do. But I think as elected officials and everybody, we have to try and find a new way of explaining to people that we all have to do much more to explain and get people to do something about this incredible meltdown that's happening in Canada, happening all over the world, and somehow it's lost. This whole critical life issue is disappearing, going in the wrong direction. So thank you for being on the right side of it, and please continue to do what you can to ensure that we've got sustainability in all the investments that OMERS is involved in, and wish you the best of luck.
We look forward to coming back post-February and being able to show you very clearly that we have made substantial progress.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Pasternak.
Yes, thank you very much, Madam Chair, and I want to thank you for coming and visiting with us today, and of course your thoughtful presentation and your aspirations. And I don't think I have to remind you that, and you've mentioned it in passing, that your number one priority is to your contributors and to making sure when their working careers are over and they have decided to retire, that there is a viable, secure pension plan for them. And the other thing is, we'd like to see our pension plans investing in Canada, in Canadian businesses, and creating economic activity here. So while you have to keep your eye on green initiatives, it is important to stick with your core mission to make sure there's a secure, well-funded pension plan and to make sure we're investing in Canadian businesses. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. Any additional speakers? Seeing none, thank you for joining us. Look forward to seeing you again next year. That brings us to, we need a motion to receive. Deputy Mayor Morley, all those in favor, all those opposed, that carries. Thank you for the catch on that paperwork. Are we ready on 17.2 or should we go to 17.3? Yes. Okay, we are ready on 17.2. Were there any questions on 17.2 before we go to speakers? Councillor Sachs has an amendment.
Yes, so Mr. DiGeronimo, you've asked me to make a motion.
Through you, Madam Chair, yes.
Do we do this in open or do you want closed session for this?
I'm sorry, I
Do
could.
you want closed session for this?
If we're going to get into specific numbers, we'd have to go into close. If we're just moving this motion, we don't have to.
Okay, so why have you asked me to make a motion?
As we continue to have negotiations with the equipment supplier, and we see continued deterioration of the meter transmission units out in the system, we wanted to have the operational flexibility that if it made sense for the city to protect our customers that we have the authority to procure more units if they're available for us to get them, while we continue to complete our negotiations and before we report back on a long-term strategy for council to consider in the new year.
All right, so for clarity, this is an interim motion. This is basically just holding the fort today, and you're going to come back to us in a couple of months with a detailed strategy for our options going forward. Is that right?
That's correct. As we laid out in the attachment of our report, we're still analyzing all of the options and long-term issues, but at the same time, we have to keep the system running. So this gives us that flexibility.
All right. Now, in the meantime, you're catching up on bills to everybody who missed bills, which means that sometimes people are getting lump bills, which they get very excited about. Have you got a process in place to allow people to pay that off over time?
Through you, Madam Chair, yes, we've been working with Revenue Services Division. We have a dedicated team that's set up specifically to manage this, so residents can call 311. They get directed to that team. If there's some concerns about billing and looking at some payment plans or adjustments, the staff from Revenue Services will work with residents to manage that issue.
Okay. So I understand that, well, am I correct that for most families, water, you're now billing people if their meter has failed, if the meter transmission has failed, you're billing people by their historic water use, whatever they used to use. Is that right?
That is correct. We take a look at past records.
Right. And for most families, most of the time, water use doesn't change very much from one year to the next.
That's correct.
Right. But there are some circumstances where there's going to be a significant change. If you have a new baby or a teenager moves to university, there can be big changes in the water use in a house, right?
There could be, yes.
Okay. And if people don't want to then just be billed on the basis of their historic water use, then their option is to go and find their water meter and read it and submit that to 311.
Through you, Madam Chair, Revenue Services is coming up with a variety of options to address how to get the reads. They can phone it in, they can send pictures. We're looking at using other technologies. So there's more work to be done to improve the customer service side of managing the estimated reads and getting a trued up reading from our customers. But yes, we've already started that process of accepting a read over the phone or a picture being sent.
Okay, so people can basically read their own meter and get an accurate reading, or they can choose to go on a historic basis. But the challenge is to find and read the meter. So my partner and I tried, we couldn't find ours. So what are you doing to help ignorant homeowners like me find their water meter and know how to read it so that they can get accurate water bills?
So part of our strategy is to start pushing out communications to all customers, even ones that haven't had a failed unit, to start letting them know about this issue. So we're working with our communication staff to push out those notices, and they will be sent to all homeowners. So that's still in progress. And issues such as you just described are part of the things we're talking about. How do we get people to find it? What's it look like? How to read a meter? That kind of thing.
All right, but your letter is not going to tell me where my meter is.
No, we will give you a general description of where to go look for it.
I looked in the basement. Okay, I mean, people need, if this is the answer, go read your own meter, we have to make it easier for people to find and read the meters.
Ultimately, if people continue to struggle to find the meter, they can contact us, and we will send a staff person to visit them and to identify where their meter is. So we're offering that as well to some people who have trouble finding their meter.
Okay, when are all of these supportive options going to be available?
So they're already in place. What we're doing is building the various options off of that. So if people call, for example, right now, 311, they will be directed to that dedicated team. If they have a significant concern with their reading or they're concerned with the meter, they can be forwarded over to Toronto Water, and we will dispatch one of our technicians to go visit that homeowner and have a conversation with them. So that's already occurring today. What we need to do is ramp it up as we get more and more customers go on estimated reads.
Whoa. Okay, that's it. Time. Next. Councillor Pasternak. Wait your turn. Put your hand up.
A point of order. A point of order, Madam Chair.
You hold my
I'd like
time,
to go in
please.
camera, because I think there's some sensitive legal issues here that I would like to raise.
Okay. Yeah, let's do that. Are there any public questions? And then I think we can stand it down. We can do it last. We have deputants here and lots of people. So do you want to just wait until you go in camera, or you want to ask questions now?
I can ask my in-camera questions, and then when we go, I can ask my public questions, and then when we go in camera, I'll ask those.
Okay. We'll hold the whole item. You okay with that? We'll wait, we'll do it all, and well, hold it last, we'll do the public questions, then we'll switch in. Okay, that brings us to IE, the marathon, IE something .3. 17.3, thank you. Temporary closures for the Gardiner Expressway. Councillor Pasternak had questions, and I do have a motion.
I did, and this is for the deputy city manager. Now, in November of 2023, the province and the city came to an agreement where the Don Valley Parkway and the Gardiner would be uploaded to the province. And the reasons given, the Gardiner would be, the province would be taking on the risk of disrepair, and the city would be relieved of a heavy capital expenditure. I don't see any of that really happening. We've commenced $500 million in repairs on the Gardiner, and now we're still in charge of street closure permits, and we're also in charge of policing. So at what point do we wash our hands of this, and the Gardiner and the DVP are really property of the province?
So through the chair, the city right now is going through a due diligence process with the province. And once that's concluded, then it'll be determined at what point they actually take it over. But that process is underway right now.
So when it comes to the construction work that's taking place now, are we going to be compensated for that work? When this deal was done, we had $500 million tendered, and they proceeded with that. And what are the chances of retrieving that back from the province?
So through the chair, the city will be compensated for that after we go through the due diligence process.
Okay, that concludes my questions.
Thank you. Are there any other questions on this item?
Yes, that's a good question that Councillor Pasternak has asked, because I had that same question asked. He said, why is the city doing the repairs on the Gardiner when I thought it was uploaded to the province? Could you explain that in Canadian Tire English, please? What is happening?
So through the chair, the city is going through a due diligence process.
What does due diligence mean?
So looking at the asset, going through and determining the state of all of that before it's uploaded to the city. But the province has committed to paying those bills. We're reimbursing us at the end of that.
So therefore, right now we're evaluating, itemizing the cost in the repairs. That construction repair process that's going on right now?
So they're evaluating, looking at what is the asset and sort of what will be uploaded to the city, the asset. So looking at all of that information. Once that's done and we've gone through that process, the Gardiner and DVP will be uploaded to the province, and the province is committed to covering the costs of any investments we've been making in the interim.
The investments by the ongoing necessary reconstruction, repairs, all those costs eventually, because I saw where the minister agreed to forward us $90 million to offset some of the costs, I thought. The Minister of Transportation with Mayor Chow, they made some kind of announcements about helping to expedite the process of repairs and reconstruction. I don't know what that was about.
So I believe what you're referring to is the work that's going on in the Gardiner right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But who's paying for the work that's going on in the Gardiner right now, and who will eventually pay for it?
Eventually, the province is paying for that.
Okay, that's what that we can say then, that eventually the province will pay for those repair bills on the Gardiner.
Yeah, well, we go through this process.
After you go to the accounting of the cost. Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, additional questions? Speakers, I have a motion So this is just that City Council forwarded it to the TTC and Metrolinx and request that we ensure there's no planned closures on that same day. And this is kind of a fool me once, fool me twice, but not 3 times, because at one point it was either a marathon or triathlon and the Lakeshore East was closed down. And another time we had a big section of the Young Subway closed down. So I think when we are doing these marathons and triathlons, these big races, that we have to make sure all the major TTC and Metrolinx routes are running. Okay, any other speakers to the item? Okay, Councillor Pasternak.
I'm going to be very brief. I think we're taking enormous risks by hanging on to this non-performing asset that we've already had an agreement in principle to upload it to the province. I really don't understand why we proceeded with $500 million in repairs with, I guess, a handshake that we would get that back. We're also policing these roadways where it should really be turned over to the OPP, and now we're governing a street closure and permits. We're also taking a lot of the political blowback by the construction lane closures that are taking place. I would strongly urge staff to accelerate this third-party due diligence. It's almost been a year, and get both the Gardiner and the Down Valley Parkway off our hands. Thank you.
Okay, any additional speakers to the item? And what? Okay, so the amendment that I have, all those in favor, all those opposed, that carries. Item is amended. All those in favor, all those opposed, that item carries. Is item IE, Councillor Pasternak, you had questions on 17.6. Do you think this will be closed, quick, and then we can dispose of that so park staff can leave?
No, just could you give me to confer with staff and you can go to 17.4.
Okay, so we have to continue to hold is the question. Okay, great. So 17.4, we have 8 deputants. We'll call out 3 at a time so you can get ready to speak. Our first speaker is Jill Penaloza, followed by Michael Longfield, followed by Faraz Golizadeh. So Jill, do we have you online? Gil. Thank you. Gil Penaloza. Online. Gil, we have you online. We just need you to unmute so that we can hear you. Paging Gil Penaloza. Okay, we'll come back. We'll go to Michael Longfield. Thank you for joining us. You have 5 minutes. Michael? Yeah, it's you. There you go, 5 minutes.
I sprained my knee on the weekend and can't really walk very well, but I can still ride a bike, which is a good reminder that bikes can be mobility devices. I'm Michael Longfield. I'm the Executive Director of Cycle Toronto. We're a member-supported charity that is working to make Toronto a more vibrant and healthier city for everyone. I'm very much in favor of this Parkside motion. Actually very pleased to see it be tabled here today, given sort of what's being discussed at a provincial level. And on that front, maybe there are sort of fewer deputants in letters than you might expect for this side of item. That's, sort of a key priority for Cycle Toronto. And that's because for the past month, we've been focused on what's been revealed now as Bill 212, the Reducing Gridlock and Saving You Time Act. And so far, over 10,000 people have signed this petition in opposition to this unprecedented provincial overreach and telling the province to stay in their lane. I think our only comments on this Parkside motion is really just the timelines where it's proposed that even the phase 1 portion of the bikeways wouldn't start till 2026. And especially in terms of some of the language in Bill 212, I think there's extra urgency to try to make this happen as soon as possible. So in the act itself, which again, as a reminder, would limit where cities could build bikeways and potentially remove existing ones, there is a clause that says that sections won't come into force if a contract has already been awarded or entered into for the procurement of construction, installation, or marking services for the bicycle lane, or if the construction, installation, or marking of the bicycle lane is to be done by the municipality, not by any party under contract. Such work has already commenced. So again, I think, I know this is currently being planned as a 26 project. I think you'll hear folks also talk about a sort of moral need to do this faster, but I think there also really is a practical one that if we can accelerate this, start putting the pieces in place sooner, it might give us means this project gets on the ground and not part of this broader provincial interference. You know, I do want to say, as best I can tell, the only data justifying Bill 212 is the government's internal polling data, that this is a political winner. Not only is Bill 212 not supported by any real evidence, to tackle congestion, it is also an affront to local democracy. I think it's particularly invalidating to all the work that all of you here on this committee do, sort of taking in data, the work that staff is doing, creating reports, doing public consultations, getting that kind of feedback. And now the ministry would just overrule all this work that y'all are doing without any clear guidelines on it. And, you know, I do expect Toronto to use its full legal and moral weight to resist on this. In that light, I do want to highlight two comments from last week's Bloor Street Bike Lanes community meeting that was hosted by Deputy Mayor Morley, that to me demonstrate the clear leadership Toronto needs to show facing this threat. The first is from Deputy Fire Chief Jessup, responding to questions around concerns around EMS response times due to the bikeways. And he said, I've just pulled the latest data, and what are two key performance indicators that we openly and transparently for the last 5 years report to City Council on for your ward show that your response times have been improving. That's response times, just to clarify, that's the response times have been improving since the bikeways were installed. And again, who am I to argue with the Deputy Fire Chief? Who is anyone to argue with the Deputy Fire Chief? I think if folks are saying they have their own data that contradicts the Fire Chief, Deputy Fire Chief, I would encourage them to bring it to him because this is his job. The second one is from the Deputy Mayor herself, who was unequivocal in her support. And she said, at this time, as a local representative, my objective is to continue to work towards improving the infrastructure, and the removal of the bikeways is not something I am interested in. You know, Minister Aclara, again, without any evidence, has framed this legislation as a necessary step to folks' well-being. He said, quote, it's about giving people more time with their families. 6 people have been killed riding their bikes in Toronto this year. That's more than the previous 3 years combined. I've spoken with several of those families. They're facing an immeasurable loss. Frankly, that trivializes the minister's comments. All those deaths occurred along busy arterial roads like Bloor Street because people riding their bikes want to get to the same places that people driving and taking transit. This committee is doing the work to find out where bikeways make sense. Sometimes that's arterials, sometimes it's secondary roads, but at the end of the day, we all just want to get home safely. So again, hope this project can be moved forward to a more accelerated timeline, and thank you.
Thank you. Questions of the deputants? Seeing none, thank you for joining us. I'll go back and see if we can get Gil Penaloza online.
Yes, hello?
Hi, we can hear you. You have 5 minutes. Thank you for joining us.
Oh. Hello? Yes.
Hi, you're a little bit quiet. I don't know if there's a way for you to get closer to your microphone.
Can you hear me now?
That's better. Thank you. 5 minutes.
How can I share something?
There's a share screen, but there's a share button at the bottom of the screen.
Yeah, but it says cannot share content. You cannot share content unless the host allows me.
It should be open now.
Okay, can you see it now?
Yes, thank you. Go ahead. You have 5 minutes.
Okay, perfect. Thank you very much. I also have screen, but I don't know what happened. But anyway, I want to thank you for the possibility to talk about Hyde Park. And there are millions of visitors, 365 days of the year, the 4 seasons. So we need to make it safe and enjoyable for all ages and abilities. Can you still see it?
Yes, we can.
As one screen or as two?
Sorry, there is a slide in front of us that says Hyde Park, millions of visitors, 365,
Okay,
safe,
one.
enjoyable, Parkside Drive.
Perfect. Okay. So this is a topic that I've been thinking about for a long time, even before COVID, because there's also a huge issue of the mobility study of Hyde Park, and I had presented this model. Unfortunately, the counselor of the ward did not even thought about it, didn't bring it to the public meetings. This is what should be done. By the way, you have thousands and thousands of signatures that are coming to eliminate car-free. And it doesn't have to be all car-free or non-car-free, and this has to do with Parkside. My proposal here is Parkside. You know, I read Ed Keenan yesterday in the Toronto Star. He quoted that there were 1,400 collisions in the last 10 years. That's almost one every 2 days, like one today, one in 2 days, one every 2 days. So my proposal is that you need to make it safe. The city has failed to make Parkside safe. And who's at fault? The drivers and also those who have the power to make it safe, but have failed to make it safe. My recommendation is that Parkside has to be 30 kilometers an hour, as well as Bloor. And I think you should pass a policy that all of the roads, while they are in a sandwich between a public park or a public library and housing, should be 30 kilometers an hour. So, and how to enforce it? You need to put humps. Every 100 to 200 meters, you gotta have a hump. You gotta have speed cameras. You have road diets, but you cannot give up. 1,400 incidents in the last 10 years. And those are the ones reported to the police. There are many, many more that people don't bother to wait for the police because it takes a lot of time. So I do think that it is simple to make it safe. It is doable. As far as the bike lane is very important because we should not even measure how many people are cycling in Toronto because there is no connectivity. It's a miracle that people bike in Toronto when there is no connectivity. We need to make connections between Bloor and the lake. There are none. So this proposal to make it along Parkside is a really, really good one. But we need about 8 of those from east to west. We need to connect Bloor to the lake. We need to connect Bloor to the places where people work. If there is no connectivity, people are not gonna bike. So we could have 2 or 3 times more people cycling all over Toronto if we improve on connectivity. And this connectivity along Parkside will be really, really important. So I think that you should, my petition is to make Parkside and Bloor, while it borders Hyde Park, 30-kilometer max and enforce it. It's really, really simple. Put humps every 100 meters and people will do it. And also fix Hyde Park. Don't make it a conflict. It doesn't have to be car people versus walking versus cycling. No, this solution that I propose is good for everybody. 24/7, 52 weeks of the year. So I thank you very much. And I don't know if you have any questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions to the committee? There's no questions. Thank you for joining us. Our next speaker is Faraz Golizadeh, followed by Adam Rogers, followed by George Emerson. Do we have Faraz in the room? Thank you for joining us. When you're ready, you have 5 minutes. Yes, we'll get AV to help you.
My name is Faraz, and I am co-chair of Safe Parkside, a community safety advocacy group formed by neighborhood residents who are deeply concerned with speeding, the lack of safety, and the dangerous road conditions that persist on Parkside Drive. I will be sharing visuals of the realities on Parkside Drive as I speak today. I ask that you please take a look at these visuals because they will convey the dangerous conditions and the need for urgent action much better than any words can. These visuals provide a glimpse at what we are encountering and experiencing on Parkside. We would like you to witness them too. As they say, pictures are worth 1,000 words. This day has been a long time coming. I wish I could sit here in a celebratory mood, but it's been a long, frustrating, and very tragic journey that brings us here today. My family and I have been advocating for safety on Parkside Drive for over a decade. Some of our neighbors have been doing so for over 2 decades. Safe Parkside was formed prior to the deadly 2021 crash with the goal to prevent tragedy and save lives. We failed in that goal because our city did not support us in our effort. We are here today asking for that support. We are asking for our city to prioritize the health and safety of the many families, children, schools, daycares, seniors, cyclists, residents, visitors, and all the other vulnerable road users who must endure the dangers on Parkside in order to enjoy a nice day at the park. Such dangerous conditions should not exist anywhere on our city streets, let alone in a city-designated community safety zone, which is inexplicably lacking in all of the city's own minimum safety requirements for an arterial road, and also happens to be located alongside the city's busiest park. This is a recipe for tragedy, and tragedies are exactly what we have experienced on Parkside. Parkside residents have had to play the role of first responders, with one incredible resident performing CPR, trying to save the life of someone's father and grandfather. We have seen 3 innocent people die in recent years, many more seriously injured, and we care for 2 memorials on this short 2-kilometer street. We appreciate Mayor Chow voicing her concerns about the dangerous conditions on Parkside Drive, having recently said, and I quote, "Parkside Drive has seen fatalities, has seen serious injuries. We need to do something about Parkside Drive." Councilor Perks also shared his concerns, having recently said, "It's almost as if we have a highway that runs between people's homes and the city park, and that's just not a good circumstance." How can the city make such admissions and yet move so slowly to deliver these life-saving safety improvements? It will potentially take 5+ years since the adoption of the Parkside Drive study before these life-saving measures are implemented. 5+ years after the horrific day that cost Mr. and Mrs. Avila their lives and their precious time with their 2 grandchildren. This is an unacceptably slow and deadly pace to safety. While we appreciate these honest admissions from the mayor, words will not save lives, only action will. That is why Safe Parkside kindly requests that the first phase of the Parkside Drive study, which involves the installation of bike lanes between Blur Street and the High Park Trail, be completed in 2025, reflecting this clear need for urgency. If the Lakeshore intersection is too complex a project to deliver in 2025, it can be completed at a future time. The most important thing is doing what we can as quickly as we can to ensure no one else is seriously injured or killed in such a senseless and preventable way. Our Vision Zero commitment requires as much. We look forward to our city heeding residents' calls for safety, heeding our mayor's calls for action, heeding their own data which indicate the urgent need for action, and finally delivering the much-needed, long overdue, and life-saving safety measures to Parkside in 2025. And I would just like to add that some of these photos were prior to the safety improvements that were recently made. And while those changes have made a small difference, they're not nearly anywhere close to what we need. These last few photos have all occurred after these changes that the city has made, clearly illustrating that these dangers still exist, that people's lives are still at risk, and that much more needs to be done, and it needs to be done quickly. This last photo is particularly frustrating and sad, seeing a motorist crash onto the sidewalk right by a community safety zone sign. what's the purpose of this sign if the city's not willing to do anything to make this community safe? Thank you.
Thank you for your deputation. Are there any questions of the deputants? Thank you for joining us today. Our next speaker is Adam Rogers, followed by George Emerson.
Hello, can you hear me?
Hi, thank you for joining us, Adam. You have 5 minutes.
So I wasn't going to speak today because I don't live directly in this area. I'm in Ward 3 at Etobicoke Lakeshore. But with the recent bill proposed by the provincial government, and how this could impact a project such as this, I felt that I needed to speak, especially because of a local context in a similar area in Etobicoke Lakeshore that we've had similar problems. So I'll get right into it. This project is not about bike lanes. This project is about safety. As this previous speaker just mentioned, this is safety for pedestrians, safety for cyclists, safety for car drivers. Having this bike lane, including the other measures included in this, is to enforce safety on this dangerous stretch. I appreciate the work that the local community has gone into this to get the changes up to this point improved. For example, we've seen a reduction of the street's speed to 40. However, unfortunately, as we've seen, that is never enough. Fundamentally, this condition of the road is what is making this unsafe. People drive too fast, even if there is a sign about community safety, there's speed. Now, I contrast this to the street quite near to where I grew up, Burnhamthorpe, between Dundas and Kipling. Unfortunately, this street has seen a cyclist fatality this year, the 6th cyclist this year, a 20-year-old student who was killed on that road. And I contrast this because the Islington Village community has been working diligently to improve the condition of this road. This includes community safety signs, that's similar to Parkside, reduction speed to 40, increase more traffic lights on Holiday Road. But unfortunately, it's not enough. Many in that community are looking for bike lanes. Bike lanes are not just for protecting cyclists, they're for reducing the speed on the road so that people get home safely. I was in the community council, Etobicoke York Community Council meeting. I saw the members of the local community, including the head of the Islington ratepayers, send similar pictures to what I saw here. A car literally almost through the front door of a person's house because of the nature of that street. Now, the reason I contrast is this: unfortunately, we've had on the books there since 2016 the plan to put bike lanes along Burnhamthorpe, and there has been no action. And as I said, this is not about Burnhamthorpe. This is about Parkside. We need to get this done, and we need to get this fast. This is about safety. This is not about bike lanes. Bike lanes serve a purpose. They provide safety for cyclists, but as I mentioned, this provides safety for everyone: pedestrians, drivers, and cyclists. This will narrow the road space and help enforce that 40 kilometers an hour change that we made. If we are really speaking to Vision Zero, we need to support this. And I should also add, as we've seen with this frankly reckless policy that the Ford government is, the idea that we only use just traffic speeds as the reason for reducing a lane is preposterous. As we see here, the reason for reducing a lane here is for the safety of all road users. Even if we're talking about a minor, let's say 2-minute reduction of time, we're talking about, look at the number of people whose life were forever altered because of the dangerous nature of this street. I won't go any further on the provincial legislation. Many people who are more on top of this than I will say a lot, but honestly, we need to get it done. And as we see in this legislation, if a contract is put forward for a lane before the legislation goes through, they will not cancel it. So time is of the essence. Let's get it done. Let's get it done now so that no one else will lose a life on this dangerous street. I will mute myself unless there's any questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions of the deputant?
Yeah, just one simple question.
Councillor Cole.
Are you not aware that the proposed provincial legislation will also be retroactive in nature?
I'm well aware of that, but currently, from my reading, that it hasn't 100% clear if it will be retroactive. But I'm also concerned that they will add that in committee. I just read the updated. It's all being posted online, and I should also note there is room for comment for everyone, including city councilors, to comment on the nature of this legislation. They have an open comment for the community.
Have you visited your local MPP?
I have. Unfortunately, my local MPP has put a public posting saying they are wishing to remove bike lanes. My local MPP, Christine Hogarth in Etobicoke Lakeshore, but I have commented to her directly multiple times, and as well as the neighboring MP, Vaughn Baker, who unfortunately has taken a strong stance against protected bike lanes, and I've expressed my displeasure with his policy, including attending the Councillor Morley's very well-organized community council meeting to voice his opinions on an issue that's outside of his own jurisdiction.
Okay, thank you.
No problem.
Thank you. Additional questions of the deputant? Okay, thank you. Before we go to the next deputant, Councillor Pasternak has identified he doesn't have any questions on 17.6 anymore. They've all been answered. Does anybody else wish to hold that, or can we release that?
Be happy to release it.
Okay. Okay, thank you. I'll move the item. All those in favor? All those opposed? That carries. Thank you for park staff that stayed for that. Okay, moving back to item IE 17.4. Our next speaker is George Emerson, followed by Nina Golazade, followed by Michelle Golazade. George, do we have George on the room or online?
He was online, just ask if he's here in the room.
George?
So we don't see him online. So
We don't see George online. Okay, so we'll stand down, we'll move to the next people, we'll come back and do another call. Do we have Nina Golazade? Thank you for joining us. You have 5 minutes.
I'm 2 years old. I've seen more crashes than I can count. I walk to Keele subway station a lot, and it is very scary when cars zoom by really fast. The sidewalk is so narrow that if I stick out my hand, I can touch the cars. It feels like everybody is in a big rush, like it's some kind of race. Plus, it's even more nerve-wracking when you have to pass by somebody. I go to Hyde Park often, and if I'm the only one crossing the road, I feel unsafe and nervous. If I want to go somewhere on my bike, I have to avoid Parkside and weave my way around because it is way too terrifying, especially knowing that 3 people have been killed here. I love biking and I can't wait to bike on my own street. Thank you.
I just want to say the same thing. Thank you for coming. What you're saying is absolutely right. When we're talking about climate action, we're talking about your future and also a cheaper, healthier, faster way to get around downtown. So we're fighting for you against everything Doug Ford's trying to do. Thank you for showing up.
Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Michelle Golazade.
Good morning. Thank you. Good morning. My name is Michelle. I'm a Parkside Drive resident, and I support making Parkside a complete street. I have a lot I could talk about as someone who lives on such a dangerous street, as a person who travels primarily by bike and by walking, and also as someone who's lost a loved one who was killed on a Toronto arterial road by a reckless driver. But I thought I'd share the time that my child and I narrowly missed being struck, most likely killed, by a heavy truck. We were coming back from a walk in High Park My child, who was a baby at the time, was asleep in the carrier, and as we were approaching the Howard Park gates, which is the main entrance on Parkside Drive, and I'd seen enough crashes at this spot to know that you never wait for the green light in front of the gates. You always wait behind. And if you saw the photos that were shared earlier, you would have seen many examples of crashes onto the sidewalk at this very spot where many park visitors are entering and exiting the park. I did approach the road in order to hit the pedestrian button. I normally return behind the gate, but for some reason I didn't do this day. I got distracted by a text message on my phone and then realized the light had already turned green. So as I crossed the road, not even finished crossing, I heard the unmistakable sound of a serious crash. A got junk truck had crashed onto the sidewalk where I had just been standing, smashed over the stone wall, and went 50 feet into the park. I have experienced many close calls on Parkside, but this one really affected me. The sound of the heavy truck hitting the stone retaining wall and then continuing in the park for 50 feet. How fast was that truck going? What if I had stayed behind responding to that text message? Or what if someone else had been there? Please listen to concerned citizens when they are telling you something is seriously unsafe. Why has this fight been so long and so tiring and still will continue years beyond this day? It's been over a decade of advocacy. Please take a look at the photo. That's the got junk truck that crashed into the park. This is not okay. We can't wait any longer for safety. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your deputation. Are there any questions of the deputants? Thank you for joining us. I'll do one more call for George Emerson online in the room. Okay, so that brings us to our final deputant on this item, Hamish Wilson. He was here earlier. Okay, questions of staff? Okay, seeing none. Speakers on this item, outside speakers first. Councillor Perks.
Thank you very much, Chair Jennifer. Members, you heard from the community very clearly about what this is about, the key issue here. Many of you will have been on Parkside Drive, but you might not have ever walked Parkside Drive. Parkside Drive has homes on one side and a sidewalk in front of those homes, which is too narrow to meet the city standard. On garbage day, if you're pushing a stroller, you maybe have to move the stroller out of the way or step into traffic. That's how narrow that sidewalk is. On the other side, because there's a retaining wall to keep the park from washing into the street, it's too narrow to have a sidewalk. This is effectively, therefore, a highway running through a city neighborhood between the front doors of homes and a park. It's an unacceptable condition. City's been taking small incremental steps, allowing parking on the east side, lowering the speed, putting in traffic lights, putting in automated speed enforcement. But as the deputant said, those are small incremental changes. It doesn't change the fundamental fact that this is a highway running between front doors and a park. The proposal you have in front of you today sets out a design both for the bike lane and for intersection treatments, and also as a phase 2, the connection between Parkside Drive and the lakeshore, which quite frankly, if you've ever walked that, is designed only for cars. It's the right thing to do if you want to stand by the city's commitment to Vision Zero. It's the right thing to do if you believe in having neighborhoods instead of treating Toronto as a place you drive through at high speeds. Another important piece of it is thinking about our overall goals on building bike lanes and bike infrastructure. As an analogy, would you build a subway station that buses couldn't get into? Would you build a road that you couldn't turn on or off? No, of course not, transportation systems function as networks. This is an important piece of the network between two of the most important pieces of bike infrastructure in the city, the Bloor Bike Lane and the Martin Goodman Trail. It creates a protected bike lane, which, as our staff have pointed out to us over and over again, is for many, many people, the only kind of bike infrastructure that many people will drive or use. So for all of those reasons, I encourage you to support this. Now, just a quick word on the context. As you've heard, the province of Ontario has decided that because they're incapable of managing or completing any of their own transportation projects, they want to take over some of ours. I urge you to take this as a moment to tell them to stick to their knitting. When they are actually able to give us an opening date for the Eglinton LRT or the Finch LRT, and when they can give us a real costing on the $50, $100, $200 billion idea of building a tunnel underneath the 401, and when they can give us any sense they have coherent thinking on transportation policy, then maybe we could invite them into the conversation about how people travel safely, comfortably, and environmentally sound ways around the city of Toronto. Thank you.
Thank you. He didn't move a motion.
Oh, I was speaking.
Yeah. Additional speakers to this item. Councillor Perruzza and then Deputy Mayor Morley.
Sure, I'm happy to take my turn. I think that there needs to be a much broader think about not only implementing safety, but making sure that people are able to move around. We can't just every time we entertain one of these conversations. So as I think about Parkside Drive, I think about Weston Road in my area. All these homes that shallow lots, all their driveways open up onto Weston Road. Weston Road is a major arterial road. Speed limits, I don't know, are 50 and 60 kilometers an hour. Right? So we can't just simply say we're going to gum it all up. Safety is important. There's no question about it. These folks in this area have every right to bike, walk, cross the street, and feel safe. But at the same time, this link is like a really important link. It's one of the only links in that area to the waterfront, to Lakeshore, the Gardiner, and everywhere else. If you narrow that, I can't imagine what that does on the back end in terms of congestion and everything else. What we really need to think about when we think about safety is it needs to be thought about in a far more complete way. If it also means adding to road space, then we need to add to road space to get in the sidewalks, to put in the safe bike lanes off the street. I wouldn't ride my bike on Lakeshore Boulevard. I wouldn't ride my bike on the Gardiner, right? It would be stupid for me to do so. But I'll tell you what, I ride my bike on that beautiful, bike lane along the Gardiner in the park. It's absolutely amazing and safe. So you maintain your road space, but you move people around in a safe way, whether they're walking, whether they're cycling, and everything else. And I'm not sure that the thing through here is providing that complete vision. Maybe if the road can't be widened on the what would be the east side, we need to look at the west side and what that means. In order to put in a bike lane that's off the road in a safe environment, to put in the sidewalks that are safe and where people can move around, and at the same time you maintain those connections, because people aren't just dropping out of their cars. They're not just, abandoning their cars. They need to be able to move around. So on one hand, we talk about congestion and congestion management and how we move people around. On the other side, every time the safety question comes up, it's the answer is narrow road width, sort of gum it up, slow people down, make it more difficult for people to get through. And, just people's frustration goes through the roof. It's a little like you coming in here today and saying, you know what, let's narrow Western Road between Finch Avenue and the 401. To make it safer for folks, because we want to put in a bike lane there, and we want to take away a driving lane. And then on the other side, you're going to, somebody's going to say, well, hang on a sec. What does that add to, to travel times for people, trying to get through Western Road? And the answer from our staff will be like 2 minutes, 32 seconds, or 3 minutes, 35 seconds. Or 4 minutes, 21 seconds. It's incremental. It's 4 and 3 and 2 and 5 and 7 and 9 and 11. That's what happens. That's the ultimate answer. And people still need to get to move around. So I'm not supporting this today because I believe that more work needs to be done on this, and we have to have a far more complete picture. So when you come forward and say, we want to build a bike lane, I want to see that bike lane put into a safe environment. I want safety as an answer, but I also don't want to see road space diminished. I want to see our staff come in and say, you know what, we're going to increase by 2.5 minutes the travel time on this street, not lowered it by 2.5 minutes. That's what I'd like to see.
Thank you. Additional deputants. Deputy Mayor Morley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would disagree a little bit with my colleague on the point that we put them where they're safe, because I think what was made very clear to us through the ongoing work and the advocacy from the local community is there are not currently safe conditions, and this is a tool firmly in our toolbox that we can pull the lever on and utilize to create those conditions. And so I know that this continues to be a very divisive issue in our city. And I'm really grateful and proud to work with the incredible staff who are continuing to put effort and time and energy and expertise into the kinds of options and opportunities that are going to better serve the constituents who we are ultimately accountable to. And so, I think about how can we continue to do better on this, and digging into our whatever side we're on this issue and turning our backs to each other is not the way forward. It's Eglinton open. There are a lot of priorities that are going to help ease congestion, and providing safe, accessible, sustainable options to people in their own communities is part and parcel of that puzzle, and it's one that is our responsibility, and I think we need to take it seriously. We talk a lot in this committee about environment and climate change, and we need to evolve and adapt with our current reality. Our city is growing exponentially. Congestion is a problem citywide, but we cannot let that real challenge get in the way of our responsibilities to deliver additional alternative options and strike a better balance for all road users, so folks aren't taking their lives into their hands, walking their children to the park, or trying to get to and from where they're trying to go in a safe way on their bicycles. So I think we have an incredible amount of work before us to continue to do. I support the item before us today and really do hope that it succeeds in delivering the kind of safety and additional improvements in a real tangible way for the local residents. For me, I came into this work not because I like politics. I'm quickly learning how much I very much do not. But it is actually about leadership. And I'm sick and tired as a resident and as an individual in this world of seeing people disregard the kinds of initiatives and strategies and goals that we set for ourselves when it comes time to actually do the things that are required to make these things real. having a Vision Zero strategy, having a Transform TO strategy, they're not as good as the paper they're on if we're not willing to do the important work day in and day out through these committees, in our individual local communities, and with the support and guidance from those most impacted in our streets and in our roads. So I'm really proud of what we're doing as a city, and I know the province isn't exactly happy with our approach, but I'm confident in our ability to rationalize and justify everything we're doing and to demonstrate the effectiveness of this kind of infrastructure as one part of the ongoing solution to address and move people better through our streets. So I just want to say thank you to staff, thank you to the local councillor for his leadership, and to the deputants and community who've been fighting for so many years for safety and dignity in your streets. And I'm glad to be part of hopefully getting that done for you. So thank you, those are my comments.
Thank you. Councillor Sachs, Councillor Pasternak.
Yes, like Deputy Mayor Morley, I'm certainly going to vote for this and vote for it at council. We need to build this. This is a matter of, everything that we say we care about. It's about safety. It's about climate. And maybe a couple of you noticed a hurricane or two in the last couple of weeks. We have transformed TO. We know what we need to do. We need to do our part. No, we can't do it all on our own, but neither can we sit aside and do nothing. It is part of our responsibility to dramatically reduce our own burning of fossil fuels, and at the same time, we have a responsibility to local residents to make their lives safer. And more than half the people in my ward don't have a car. They've got a right to get around. They've got a right to get around safely. And the way we have designed the city to put priority on cars and trucks, and to hell with the young mothers, their babies, the people trying to walk across the street, that is a terrible way to live. It's bad for safety. It's bad for air quality. It's bad for cost of living. Forcing people to have to own a car dramatically increases what it costs them to live in this city. It's bad for business. There's lots of good data that bike lanes improve business for adjacent businesses, and especially retail businesses, food businesses, and so on, because it's so much easier to stop and shop, and you see things as you go by. It's better for home values for people who live nearby. It's better for attracting the kinds of modern businesses, innovative businesses. They look for places where people can get around, have a good quality of life without a car. So all of these things that we care about and that the Premier pretends to care about, they require safer streets with room on them for pedestrians, for cyclists, and everybody else who uses it, all the deliveries that take place in the bike lanes, the motorized wheelchairs that use the bike lanes. We need them badly, and I think we should be doing everything we can do to put them in. And that, well, starting here. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Pasternak.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. When I first ran in 2010, if you said the word bike or bike lane in York Centre, Councillor Morley's laughing because she's heard this speech before, you would lose because there was enormous hostility to it. Since that time, you've had a number of different trends that have allowed for the installation of bike lanes without the divisive, acrimonious debate and the blocking of the flow of traffic. First of all, we had millennials coming up who rode bikes, and they were obviously the sons and daughters of boomers who supported bike lanes and used them on a regular basis. At the same time, an advantage in York Centre is we had wide boulevards and wide streets. So we were able to install bike lanes, elevated bike lanes, off-road bike lanes, without affecting the flow of traffic and without closing any lanes. Traffic calming, we've tried bike lanes on Chestwood and on Wilmington as part of a traffic calming strategy. And it seemed to me that the bike lanes alone would not do it. It had to be combined with other things. But of course, this report does recommend that. I am going to echo some of Councillor Peruzza's comments in the sense that I don't believe that closing live lanes, taking out live lanes, is an answer to traffic calming. You need a very rigorous statutory and infrastructure investment. Some of the pieces are here in order to get people to slow down. Bike lanes and taking out lanes is not the answer. You're going to create unspeakable traffic jams, and it's going to lead to all kinds of unintended consequences as we go forward. The other thing that concerns me about this, if in fact the province is going to pass legislation where they can retroactively stop, and I don't know how they're going to do it, retroactively stop or dismantle bike lanes that are in the public roadway, we are in fact putting at risk $7.5 million by proceeding with this. So in general, look, I cycle, I bike around my ward as much as I can. I bike to my constituency office, and I bike for groceries as long as the list is quite small. It's great exercise, it's easy to get around, and it's very often more effective than a vehicle. But this I will not be supporting because I don't think it really drills down to a balancing proposition for both motorists and cyclists. And at the same time, I think we have to dig deeper into traffic safety initiatives in this area in order to meet the goals that we're trying to seek. Thank you.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor Cole.
I'm going to be supporting this initiative because, I mean, if you look at Parkside, I've been down Parkside, I've jogged down Parkside. That sidewalk is so narrow on the east side, and the trucks, and there's, never mind the cars, the trucks that go trying to get down to the Gardiner, you don't really want to walk there, and the houses and the lawns, and then the other side, you got the retaining wall, and you can't go on that side. It's a real challenging, let's say, piece of geography there. So this is not by any means the perfect solution to all these problems, but at least it's an attempt to slow things down, because we know empirically, if you narrow a roadway, people do go slower. The wider the roadway is, the faster they go, guaranteed. So you can add on, it's just like the 401 used to be 8 lanes. Now it's what, 24 lanes? More cars, and now they're going to increase the speed limit. So these are the conundrums we face. And it's interesting, the province at Queen's Park there now, they're going to get in, they've got so much time on their hands, they're now going to dwell with bike lane approvals throughout the province, not just Toronto. These guys have not sat in 4 months. The place has been shuttered for 4 months. Nobody even questioned, where are they? The first thing they do when they come back, they're going to legislate bike lanes. That's how much they've got on their, not healthcare, education, bike lanes. That's their priority. So they obviously have created this incredible enemy within. The bikes are the enemy within. And their polling shows that the vast majority of people blame bike lanes for congestion. They don't understand that if they had done their job in completing the Eglinton Crosstown, there'd be less congestion. It's only taking them, November 9th, it'll be 13 years. Or they could have finished the Finch West LRT, God forbid. No, we are going to concentrate on bike lanes. That's what we're facing.
They're really concentrating on anger.
Yeah, that's right. They're tapping into the frustration people have. And so, and oh yeah, and they're also telling people, oh, we've got another way of solving congestion. We are going to tunnel underneath Eglinton. Eglinton, they've already done that. But they're going to tunnel underneath the 401. Preposterous, ridiculous, obscene, $100 billion tunnel running through 15 of our wards for the next 30 years. 15 of our wards are going to have these tunnel boring machines. They're going to have the front end loaders, the cement truck. It'll take them decades to tunnel underneath the 401 through the middle of our wards. through the middle of all these homes, residential. You can just imagine congestion. You think you got congestion now, wait till they start tunneling up there. So, you know, it's just too bad that the people who, you know, thrive on making people angry, as Councillor Peruzza said, are winning. People are angry. They're looking for an easy scapegoat, somebody to blame. So they're all basically stuck in traffic, and I can understand their frustration. Stuck in traffic, and they're stuck in traffic in their cars. They're all saying, goddamn bike lanes, goddamn cyclists. That's what they're saying over and over and over again. They're as they sit in their car by themselves, and the car that costs now $50,000, $100,000 by themselves, they're blaming that poor sucker on a bike, risking their lives on Bloor Street, who can't afford a house in the suburbs, who can't afford a car, can't afford to even park in the garage. They're saying, it's your fault that I'm stuck in my $100,000 car and I can't get to where the hell they're going. They're going to Costco. That's where they all go. They're going to Costco. They're going to the city council, not the city. Yeah, okay, so that's what we're facing. So this is an attempt to try and, you can see the real trauma this is causing, the accidents are causing in this neighborhood. It's an attempt to try and just slow things down. And we have to side on the side of safety, and that's why I'm supporting this motion. Thank you.
Well said, Deputy.
Thank you. I think I'm the last speaker. I think we've done everybody already. I'm going to start by thanking city staff for community engagement they've done on this, using data to support their recommendations, and coming up with a really thoughtful solution to what is clearly a safety problem on Parkside Drive. And I also want to thank the local councillor who's been engaged on this and advocating very strongly for many years to get us to this point where we finally have a vision for a complete street on Parkside, and thank all the community members that have also been involved and came out today to tell, you know, very, very sad stories that they have seen on their streets. And I think we have to always remember that bike lanes serve the local communities. And the local communities and the local councillors are best equipped to say what the solutions are for their community. And I think that we've heard comments around looking at safety in a complete way from other speakers here. And I think that we have to remember that 6 cyclists have died on our streets this year, and that is unacceptable. And that we actually are looking at safety in a complete way with Vision Zero and the Complete Streets strategy, which recognizes that we need to make all road users safe in our city of Toronto, to make sure everybody can get to where they need to go safely. And safety has to be the priority. I think it is incredibly unfortunate distraction by the province right now with this discussion around eliminating bike lanes. And I think it is a distraction because it takes away from what the real causes of congestion are on our roads. And we know this. It's a lack of public transit, and we have major projects that are delayed and are contributing to that. The other main contributor is unprecedented construction in the city of Toronto. Very much needed investment, but it does cause traffic and it causes congestion, and we're working very hard to combat that. And lastly, it doesn't recognize the enormous population growth we are seeing in the city of Toronto that is unfortunately accompanied by a rise in single occupancy vehicles. The number of vehicles on the road is going up dramatically every single year, and we need to be able to ensure that, yes, we can get people where they need to go, but that everybody gets there in a safe way. And finally, I think it's really unfortunate because the bike lane legislation that is proposed by the provincial government does not recognize that our roads need to be safe for everyone. So I am very supportive of what's before us. It's been a very long time coming. Out of all of the streets that I have seen come through this committee, I think this is the most overwhelming case and need for a complete street. The photos that we saw, they are horrible. Horrible that families and communities have to face accidents like that on their streets. And we have to do something there. We have a great report with a great recommendation. I think we need to go forward today. You will see that the words are in there in principle, and that's to reflect that we have some uncertainty that we need to deal with. We're going to have to mitigate that as we move forward on this process, but I'm confident that City Council can come together to move this forward and make Parkside Drive safer. So with that, we will proceed to a vote on that, and I'm hearing that there is a request for it to be recorded. No? Okay. Show of hands? Okay. All those in favor? That passes. Thank you. Okay, back to 17.2 water meters, public questions, and then we'll go into camera.
So through you to staff, I mean, this is more than just a directional report, as was referenced earlier. We're sending out a non-competitive emergency contract, a sole source contract to Aclara.
Through you, Madam Chair, we are required to purchase the units because it's proprietary equipment, and so they are the sole supplier of and manufacturer of the products that we need. That is the reason why it's a non-competitive contract.
Right, but in earlier discussion, it was kind of referenced by one of my colleagues that this is just a staged report. This is pretty firm recommendations that we're giving you direction to go out and get this fixed.
Through you, Madam Chair, not in the confidential attachments. No, what this report is doing is it took emergency actions in the summer to procure a number of meter transmission units that we get from this manufacturer and supplier. And I'm reporting back on that emergency purchase in accordance with the financial control bylaw. And so it is advising you of that action that I took. And then in addition to that, in the confidential attachment, it elaborates a bit more on the issue we have with them. And that's all I would like to say in the public setting about that.
So when did we start knowing that these batteries were failing? And as I understand it, the meters were working, but they could not transmit the data. That became the issue. So did we get a trickling of complaints, or did the manufacturer notify us that this had been a problem in other cities? How did we first know, and when did we first know?
No, we noticed it as staff when we saw an increase in estimated reads that were coming from our billing system. And then what we saw over the winter was an acceleration of the number of estimated reads, and then we began the investigation of what was causing that. And that's what we reported back on in July of this summer, and we're coming back again at this point in time as well.
So staff noticed that we weren't able to read the usage from hundreds of homes, and that set off the sequence of events that brings us to today?
That's correct.
Okay, so we're dealing with two companies here, this Neptune, and I remember them because they were sending out nasty letters saying that unless people agreed to the installation of these meters, they would be fined $50,000, which was absolutely outrageous. That's how I remember Neptune. But our contract, is our contract with Neptune or with Aclara?
My advice would be if additional questions along this line, we should go on camera.
Good point. Okay, any
My next action is why don't we sue, but we'll leave that for private.
Any other public questions? So we will do a motion to go in camera. Oh, Councilor Cole
okay?
already moved it? All right, so, and the reason being, it's about a plan for negotiations. All those in favor? Oh, you have to read it out. Go ahead, you have to read it out, Councilor Cole.
I move that we go in camera on this item to discuss the
reason, you just have to read the reason.
Oh. I move that the Infrastructure Environment Committee recess its public session to meet in closed session to consider the following, i.e. 17.2, meter transmission units emergency and an emergency non-competitive contract with Aclara Technologies LLC to obtain supply of replacement water meter transmission units. Awards. Reason for confidentiality regarding a plan to be applied to any negotiations carried on or to be carried on by or on behalf of the City of Toronto. I so move.
Okay, all in favor? Opposed? That carries. We're going in camera. It was nice of you all to join us, but you gotta go. Bye.
Everyone stays.
Okay, we are returning from closed session, and I'm moving a motion that we extend past 12:30 to complete the agenda, as we are on the last item. All in favor? All opposed? That carries. Speakers to this item, Councillor Sachs, you have a motion?
Yes, thank you. I have a motion. It's somewhere. There we are. So this is an interim strategy. As explained, we are not yet at the point of having a long-term plan. The report that's before us today is an interim measure for responding to the current unexpected failure of the batteries in these devices. We do need a plan as to what we're going to do. Are we going to move directly to the next generation? Are we going to reestablish the old system? We need a plan, and we're not in a position to make that plan yet. We don't yet have advice from our staff as to what our options are or what their recommendations are. So how do we cover the interim period? We have some devices covered by the motion as it is now, but only for certain kinds of users. We may need other kinds of devices, and this gives Toronto Water the ability to continue to negotiate it, and if appropriate, to procure additional units so that we have the time to make a proper plan for what our long-term plan is and then to execute that plan, which is not going to be immediate. So that's what my motion is for, and I'm glad to make it, and I'm supporting this this matter. We do know, I mean, if anybody's interested, I'd be glad to send them a copy of my report when I was environmental commissioner on why water meters and accurate water meters are so important. Saving money, reducing waste, preserving the functionality of our water system. So they're very important, and we need to get them back. We need to get them back in a sensible fashion. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other speakers on the item? Proceed to the vote. Okay, all those in favor on the amendments? All those opposed? That carries. Item is amended. All those in favor? All those opposed? That item carries. I will confirm we've completed the agenda. And look, we didn't even need an extension. Okay, thank you, everybody.